Part 1. The Unwanted. The auction block reeked of desperation and old wood. Thalira pressed her spine against the rough-hewn post, trying to make herself smaller as the crowd of alphas and betas circled below like hungry wolves. Their scents hit her in waves, leather and musk, power and predatory interest. None of it was for her. She'd been standing here for 3 hours. 3 humiliating, soul-crushing hours while every other Omega had been claimed, purchased, whisked away to new packs and new lives. The auctioneer's voice had grown hoarse, calling out bids for the others, his enthusiasm dimming with each passing lot. Now there was only silence. "Well," the auctioneer cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes, "we have one remaining Omega, Thalira of the Nightfall Pack. She's experienced in household duties." A snicker rippled through what remained of the crowd. Thalira's cheeks burned. Experienced in household duties, not beautiful, not fertile, not desirable, just useful for scrubbing floors and cooking meals. Bidding starts at 50 silver. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 50 silver, less than the cost of a decent horse, less than the starting bid for any Omega in living memory. It was an insult disguised as mercy. 50 silver, the auctioneer repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "Do I hear 50? Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Thalira's wolf whimpered somewhere deep in her chest, a sound of pure heartbreak that she refused to let escape her lips. She'd known this moment would come, had felt it building since her 18th birthday passed without a mate bond, since her 19th came and went the same way, since her 20th birthday 3 months ago when her father finally gave up pretending she had any value to their pack. "Perhaps we should lower the starting 1,000 gold. The voice cut through the autumn air like a blade, deep and commanding and absolutely certain. Every head in the crowd turned toward the tree line where a figure emerged from the shadows. Thalira's breath caught. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle wrapped in black leather and dark wool. His hair was the color of midnight, slightly too long and falling across sharp cheekbones that could have been carved from stone, but it was his eyes that made her stomach drop, pale silver, like moonlight on fresh snow, and fixed directly on her. The Alpha King. Gasps echoed through the crowd as recognition dawned. Some of the gathered wolves actually took steps back, their survival instincts overriding their curiosity. The auctioneer's face had gone completely white. "Your Majesty?" he stammered, sketching a clumsy bow. We weren't expecting." 1,000 gold, the Alpha King repeated, his voice carrying despite its quietness. His eyes never left Thalira's face. "Final offer. But sire, perhaps you'd prefer to see our other available." "I know what I want." The words sent something electric down Thalira's spine. She found herself trapped in his gaze, unable to look away even as every instinct screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes before this apex predator. There was something in his expression she couldn't read, not hunger exactly, not simple desire, something darker and more complex, something almost familiar. "Sold!" the auctioneer squeaked, his hammer falling with a sharp crack. "To His Majesty, King Damon of the Northern Territories." And just like that, Thalira's life changed forever. King Damon approached the platform with fluid, predatory grace. Up close, he was even more intimidating, and more beautiful. Scars marked his hands and forearms, evidence of battles won and dominance earned. His scent hit her as he drew near, and her knees nearly buckled. Pine and winter storm, raw power barely leashed. And underneath it all, something that made her wolf stir with interest despite every rational thought in her head. He reached the platform in 3 smooth strides and held out his hand to her, not commanding, just waiting. "Come, little Omega," he said softly. "It's time to go home." Thalira hesitated for just a moment, looking down at that outstretched hand. It was elegant despite its size, long fingers and neat nails, but she could see the strength in it, the careful control. She placed her small hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and he helped her down from the platform with surprising gentleness. The crowd parted before them like water, no one daring to meet the Alpha King's eyes or block his path. "Wait," Thalira found her voice as they reached the edge of the gathering. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Why?" He paused, turning those unsettling silver eyes back to her. For a moment she thought he might not answer. Then his lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Because everyone else was too blind to see what was right in front of them. Before she could ask what he meant, he was leading her toward a massive black stallion waiting at the forest's edge. The horse was as intimidating as its owner, snorting and pawing at the ground with barely contained energy. "I can't ride," Thalira said quickly. "I mean, I've never—" "You'll ride with me?" It wasn't a request. King Damon swung himself up into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down for her again. This time she didn't hesitate, letting him pull her up behind him. "Hold on," he murmured, and she wrapped her arms around his waist just as he spurred the horse forward. They rode in silence through the darkening forest, the only sounds the thunder of hooves and the whisper of wind through the trees. Thalira pressed her face against his back, breathing in that intoxicating scent of pine and power, while her mind reeled with questions. Why had the Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in all the territories, bid on her? What did he want with a rejected Omega that no one else would touch? And why did something about him feel so achingly familiar, like a half-remembered dream? The answers would have to wait. For now, she was flying through the forest in the arms of a stranger who just bought her for more money than she'd ever seen, heading toward a future she couldn't begin to imagine. Behind them, the auction ground fell away into darkness, taking her old life with it. Whatever came next, there would be no going back. The Alpha King's castle rose from the mountainside like something from a dark fairy tale, all black stone and sharp towers reaching toward the star-scattered sky. Thalira had heard stories about it her whole life, how it had been carved from living rock by the first wolf kings, how it commanded views of 3 territories, how no enemy had ever breached its walls. None of the stories had prepared her for the reality. Torches blazed along the walls and in the windows, casting dancing shadows across the courtyard as they rode through the massive gates. Guards in black leather and silver mail lined their path, each one dropping to one knee as the Alpha King passed. The respect was absolute, unquestioned, and slightly terrifying. "Welcome to Shadowmere," King Damon said quietly as he helped her down from the horse. "Your new home." Thalira's legs wobbled slightly after the long ride, but she managed to stay upright. The courtyard was bustling with activity despite the late hour, servants hurrying about their business, guards changing watch, the controlled chaos of a seat of power that never truly slept. Every eye was on her. She could feel their curiosity, their confusion, their barely concealed shock. Why had their king brought home a nobody Omega from a failed auction? What use could he possibly have for someone like her? She was wondering the same thing. "Come," King Damon said, placing a hand on the small of her back. The touch sent heat racing through her, making her wolf purr with unexpected pleasure. "You must be tired." He led her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past tapestries depicting great battles and portraits of stern-faced kings. Everything was beautiful and intimidating and utterly foreign. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress, a seat of power, a place where legends were born. What was she doing here? They stopped before a heavy oak door marked with silver inlay. King Damon pushed it open, revealing chambers that took her breath away. The sitting room was easily larger than her family's entire cottage, furnished with rich fabrics and polished wood. Through an archway, she could see a bedroom with a bed big enough for 4 people, and beyond that, what looked like a private bathing chamber. "These are your rooms," he said simply. "Mine?" The word came out as barely a whisper. She'd never had her own room, let alone chambers like these. "Mine," he confirmed. His silver eyes studied her face, reading something she didn't understand. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Thalira?" Yes, Your Majesty? You're safe here. Whatever else happens, remember that. And then he was gone, leaving her alone in luxury she'd never dreamed of, with more questions than answers and the lingering scent of pine and winter storm in her lungs. Part 2. The Alpha King's Secret. Thalira woke to soft knocking on her door and golden sunlight streaming through windows that faced the eastern peaks. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the room too large, the silence too complete. Then it all came flooding back. The auction, the humiliation, the Alpha King's silver eyes, and his impossible bid. "My lady?" a gentle voice called through the door. "I've brought breakfast." "My lady?" Thalira almost laughed. 3 days ago she'd been scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots. Now servants were calling her my lady and bringing her meals in bed. "Come in," she called, hastily wrapping a robe around herself. A young woman entered carrying a silver tray loaded with more food than Thalira usually ate in a week. Fresh bread, honey, preserves, eggs, bacon, fruit. The scents made her mouth water despite her churning stomach. "I'm Elena," the servant said with a warm smile. "I'll be looking after you during your stay. His Majesty asked me to see that you have everything you need." "Thank you," Thalira said, accepting the tray with hands that shook only slightly. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my lady. Has he ever brought someone like me here before?" Elena's smile faltered slightly. "Like you, my lady. An Omega, from an auction." Thalira's cheeks burned, but she had to know. "Someone he purchased." "Oh," Elena's expression grew carefully neutral. "No, my lady, never." That should have been reassuring. Instead, it only deepened the mystery. Why her? Why now? "He's asked to see you in his study when you're ready," Elena continued. "Shall I draw you a bath first? I've brought some dresses that should fit." An hour later, Thalira found herself walking through the castle's corridors in a gown that probably cost more than her father made in a year. It was deep blue wool with silver embroidery, cut to fit her curves without being scandalous. She felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The Alpha King's study was exactly what she'd expected: dark wood, leather-bound books, weapons mounted on the walls, and a fire crackling in a massive stone hearth. King Damon sat behind an oak desk that looked like it could double as a dining table, reading from a thick ledger. He looked up as she entered, and she saw something flicker in his silver eyes. Approval, maybe, or satisfaction. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit, please." She perched on the edge of the chair, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Every etiquette lesson her mother had tried to drill into her came flooding back. Don't fidget, don't stare, don't presume. "You have questions," he said without preamble. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Ask them." The directness startled her. She'd expected to have to dance around the subject, to hint and hope he might deign to explain. Instead, he was inviting her curiosity. "Why did you buy me?" His lips curved in that almost smile again. "Straight to the heart of it." "Good. I prefer honesty to pretty lies." He leaned back in his chair, studying her face in that unsettling way of his. "Tell me, Thalira of Nightfall Pack, what do you know about mate bonds?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She'd been dreading this moment, the inevitable discussion of her greatest failure. "I know I don't have one," she said quietly. "I've been tested by 3 different pack shamans. There's nothing wrong with my bloodline, nothing blocking the bond. I'm just—" She swallowed hard. "Unmated. Possibly unmateable." Interesting. He rose from his chair and moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "And what do you know about delayed bonds?" Thalira frowned. "I've heard stories. Old wives' tales about mates who don't recognize each other until some specific trigger or circumstance. But they're just myths, aren't they?" "Are they?" He turned back to her, silver eyes intense. "What would you say if I told you that 21 years ago, a very young alpha was told by his pack's most powerful seer that his mate would be revealed to him through great trial? that she would be found in a place of rejection and shame, claimed by him alone when no one else could see her worth? The room seemed to tilt around her. I would say that sounds like another myth. And if I told you that this young alpha spent 2 decades searching every unmated omega in the territories, attending every gathering, every ceremony, every introduction his advisors could arrange, looking for the one the prophecy described. Thalira's heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. Your Majesty, and if I told you that 3 months ago this alpha, now a king, felt something shift in his chest, a pulling sensation he'd never experienced before, drawing him towards something, or someone. Please stop. The words came out as a whisper, but he continued as if she hadn't spoken, moving closer with that predatory grace. What would you say if I told you that sensation led him to a small pack gathering, where he stood in the shadows and watched a young Omega celebrate her 20th birthday alone because no one in her pack could be bothered to acknowledge her existence? Thalira's hands flew to her mouth. She remembered that night, remembered the strange sensation of being watched, the prickle along her spine that had made her turn toward the forest again and again. What would you say? King Damon continued, now close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. If I told you that every instinct this king possessed screamed that he'd finally found what he'd been searching for, but the Omega was too hurt, too convinced of her own worthlessness, to feel the bond that was blazing through him like wildfire. No! Thalira shook her head, rising from the chair on unsteady legs. No, you're wrong. I can't be... I would have felt something. Anything. Would you? His hand came up to cup her cheek, and the touch sent electricity racing through her entire body. When was the last time you allowed yourself to hope for a mate, little Omega? When did you stop believing you were worthy of love? Tears burned her eyes. I can't be your mate. Look at me, I'm nobody. I'm weak. I was rejected by my own pack. You are mine. The words came out as a low growl that made her wolf sit up and take notice. You have always been mine, from the moment you were born. I just had to wait for you to be ready to hear it. Before she could protest further, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The world exploded. Heat flooded through her, followed by a sensation like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Her wolf howled with joy and recognition, finally understanding what had been missing all these years. The bond snapped into place between them like a bridge of golden light, connecting her heart to his, her soul to his, her very existence to his. Mine, her wolf sang. Finally, finally, mine. When he pulled back, she could barely breathe. The room looked different, brighter somehow. She could feel him in her mind, a warm presence that chased away the loneliness she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. There you are, he murmured, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I've been waiting for you to come home. Part 3. Learning to Trust. The revelation should have changed everything. Instead, it left Thalira feeling more lost than ever. For 3 days after the kiss that awakened their mate bond, she barely left her chambers. Elena brought meals that went mostly untouched, offered to escort her on walks through the gardens that she declined, suggested activities that held no appeal. Thalira spent most of her time curled in the window seat, staring out at the mountains and trying to process the impossible truth. She was mated to the Alpha King. The most powerful shifter in all the territories had chosen her, not despite her rejection and perceived worthlessness, but because of some ancient prophecy that had guided his search for 2 decades. It should have been the answer to every prayer she'd never dared voice. Instead, it felt like another burden, another way she was bound to disappoint someone who deserved better. You're thinking too loudly, came a familiar deep voice from the doorway. Thalira turned to find King Damon, she supposed she should call him now, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He'd abandoned his formal attire for simple black pants and a white shirt open at the collar. Somehow the casual clothes made him even more intimidating rather than less. I didn't hear you knock, she said quietly. I did. You didn't answer. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Elena says you haven't been eating. Thalira looked away. I'm not very hungry. That's not acceptable. The alpha command in his voice made her wolf whimper with the need to submit, even as her human side bristled at the tone. You're going to make yourself sick. Maybe that would be easier, she muttered. The words had barely left her lips before he was across the room, hands gripping her shoulders and hauling her to her feet. His eyes blazed silver fire, and she could feel his wolf pressing against the bond, angry and protective and utterly dominant. Don't. The single word carried more menace than any threat. Don't you dare suggest that giving up would be easier, not when I've spent 21 years searching for you. Tears she'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. But I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be a queen or a mate or anything other than the Omega nobody wanted. His expression softened instantly. Strong arms pulled her against his chest, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other rubbed soothing circles on her back. Listen to me, he said firmly. The woman I've been waiting for isn't some perfect queen who knows all the rules and never makes mistakes. She's you, Thalira, exactly as you are. But I'm weak. You survived 20 years of rejection and dismissal without breaking. How is that weak? I'm nobody special. You're mine. That makes you the most important person in my world. I don't know anything about being a queen. Then I'll teach you. We have time. She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or regret. All she found was steady certainty and something that might have been affection? Could he actually care for her beyond the bond? Why aren't you angry with me for hiding in here like a coward? She asked. Damon's thumb traced the line of her jaw. Because you're not hiding like a coward. You're processing a massive change in your life, which is exactly what any intelligent person would do. I would be concerned if you'd just accepted everything without question. The answer was so reasonable, so patient, that it made her chest ache. When was the last time anyone had given her the benefit of the doubt? I felt it, you know, she admitted quietly. At my birthday celebration, I kept looking toward the forest like something was calling me. I thought I was imagining things. You weren't. I was there. His fingers combed through her hair, and she found herself leaning into the touch. I wanted to approach you that night, but you seemed so fragile. I was afraid I'd frighten you away. So you waited until I was humiliated at an auction instead? His jaw tightened. That wasn't the plan. I intended to approach your father privately, to ask for permission to court you properly. But then I heard about the auction. His eyes flashed dangerous silver. No mate of mine was ever going to stand on a selling block. The possessive fury in his voice made her wolf purr with satisfaction. Finally, someone who valued her enough to be angry on her behalf. I'm sorry, she said, for pulling away from you, for questioning the bond. I've never had anything good happen to me before. I keep waiting for you to realize you've made a mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting so long to claim you. His forehead came to rest against hers. But I understand why you're frightened. This is new for both of us. Have you ever been in love before? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Damon pulled back slightly, studying her face. No, have you? She shook her head. I never thought anyone could want me that way. I do. The simple statement sent heat racing through her. Not just because of the bond, Thalira. You're brave and intelligent and stronger than you know. You have a kind heart despite everything you've endured. Any man would be lucky to call you his. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. I don't know how to do this, how to be us. Neither do I, he admitted. But we'll figure it out together. That's what mates do. She nodded, something loosening in her chest for the first time since the kiss. Maybe she didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was enough to try. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Will you show me the castle? I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale, but I don't know anything about my new home." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I thought you'd never ask." The next few hours passed in a blur of grand halls and hidden passages, libraries that smelled of old leather, and rooms filled with treasures from across the territories. Damon was a surprisingly good guide, pointing out family portraits and explaining the history behind various artifacts. More importantly, he was patient with her questions and never made her feel stupid for not knowing something. By the time they reached the gardens as the sun was setting, Thalira felt more relaxed than she had in years. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring the carefully tended beds of late-blooming flowers. "My mother designed these gardens," Damon said quietly. "She said a fortress needed beauty to balance all the darkness." There was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "She's gone?" 10 years now. Fever took her quickly. He sat on a stone bench beneath an apple tree heavy with fruit. "She would have loved you." "How can you be sure?" "Because she always told me that when I found my mate, I'd know her by the way she made me want to be better than I was." He held out his hand to her. "And you do, little Omega. Every day." Thalira took his hand and let him pull her down beside him on the bench. The bond hummed contentedly between them, no longer the overwhelming force it had been, but a warm, steady presence. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal. You learn to trust me, yourself, this bond between us. And when you're ready—" He lifted their joined hands to press a kiss to her knuckles. "When you're ready, we plan a future together." For the first time since the auction, Thalira allowed herself to believe that future might actually be something worth wanting. Part 4. Enemies at the Gate. Thalira woke to the sound of horses thundering into the courtyard and voices raised in urgent consultation. Dawn was just breaking over the eastern peaks, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Beside her, Damon stirred, instantly alert in the way of an alpha who'd learned never to ignore potential threats. They'd grown closer over the past 2 weeks, sharing meals and long walks through the gardens, stolen kisses and quiet conversations by the fire. He'd been endlessly patient with her fears and insecurities, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Last night had been the first time she'd felt comfortable enough to sleep in his chambers, curled against his side while he held her close. Now that peace was shattered— "Stay here," Damon commanded, already pulling on clothes with efficient movements. "Lock the door behind me." "What's happening?" Thalira sat up, pulling the sheets around herself. "I don't know yet." He paused to kiss her forehead, quick and fierce. "But whatever it is, you're safer here." He was gone before she could protest, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the growing sounds of chaos from the courtyard below. She threw on a robe and moved to the window, peering down at the scene unfolding in the pre-dawn gloom. A group of riders had arrived, their horses lathered with sweat and foam. Even from 3 stories up, she could see the tension in their posture, the way they kept glancing over their shoulders as if expecting pursuit. One of them looked familiar. Thalira's blood turned to ice as she recognized her brother Marcus among the riders. What was he doing here? Her family had made it clear she was no longer welcome in their pack. They'd been the ones to send her to the auction in the first place. She was debating whether to disobey Damon's order and go downstairs when Elena burst through the door, face flushed with exertion and worry. "My lady, thank the moon you're awake." Elena rushed to the wardrobe, pulling out clothes. "His Majesty says you need to dress quickly. You have visitors." "My brother is here," Thalira said numbly. "Why is my brother here?" "I don't know, but His Majesty wants you in the main hall in 10 minutes. He says—" Elena hesitated. "What?" "He says to prepare yourself for unpleasant news." 20 minutes later, Thalira descended the grand staircase in a deep green dress that Elena had chosen specifically to project strength and confidence. Her hair was braided into an elaborate coronet, and she wore the silver circlet that Damon had given her the week before, a visible sign of her status as his mate and future queen. She needed every bit of armor she could get. The main hall buzzed with tension. Damon stood near the throne, speaking in low, urgent tones with his advisors. His posture screamed barely leashed violence, and she could feel his anger through their bond like a living thing. Marcus stood with 2 other wolves from her former pack, all of them travel-stained and exhausted. When he saw her approaching, his face went through a complicated series of expressions: relief, guilt, and something that might have been fear. "Thalira." He stepped forward as if to embrace her, then stopped when Damon's growl rumbled through the hall. "You look, well." "What are you doing here, Marcus?" She kept her voice level, though her hands shook slightly. "Father made it clear I was no longer part of your pack." "That's why I'm here." Marcus glanced nervously at Damon, then back to her. "Thalira, there's been an attack. Father is dead." The words hit her like a physical blow. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't this. Her father had been many things, disappointed in her, harsh, quick to anger, but he'd also been the alpha who'd kept their small pack safe for 30 years. "How?" she whispered. "Rogues." Marcus's jaw clenched. "A pack of them, maybe 20 strong. They hit us 3 nights ago, just after midnight. Father tried to negotiate, but their leader—" He shuddered. He wasn't interested in talking. Damon moved to stand behind Thalira, his hands settling on her shoulders in a gesture of support and possession. "Who leads these rogues?" "Calls himself Scar, used to be beta of the Eastern Ridge Pack before he was exiled for challenging their alpha to an illegal deathmatch." Marcus met Damon's eyes directly, showing more courage than Thalira had ever seen from her brother. "Your Majesty, he's looking for her." "Me?" Thalira's voice cracked. "Why would he want me?" "Because," came a new voice from the hall's entrance, "you're mated to the Alpha King." Everyone turned toward the speaker, a man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. Thalira recognized him as Lord Garrett, one of Damon's most trusted advisors. "Explain," Damon commanded. Lord Garrett approached with quick, efficient steps. "Sire, we've received similar reports from 3 other packs in the past week. Rogue attacks, always at night, always targeting packs with connections to the crown. They're not random raids, they're systematic strikes designed to draw you out." "And they're asking about the king's new mate," Marcus added grimly. "Specifically—" Thalira felt the blood drain from her face. "They're using me as bait." "It would seem so." Damon's voice was deadly calm, but she could feel the fury building in him through their bond. "The question is, why now? What's changed?" "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "there are rumors. Stories about an Omega who was rejected by every pack, then claimed by the Alpha King for an unprecedented sum. Some are calling it a sign that the old ways are changing, that the strong no longer rule by right of birth alone. And some are calling it weakness," Lord Garrett added bluntly. "They say the great Alpha King has been brought low by his feelings for an unwanted Omega." Thalira flinched as if she'd been slapped. Even now, even mated to the most powerful alpha in the territories, her past followed her like a curse. Damon's hands tightened on her shoulders. "Let them talk. Words have never killed anyone." "But armies have," Lord Garrett said grimly. "Sire, our scouts report that Scar isn't just gathering rogues anymore. He's recruiting disenfranchised betas, younger sons passed over for inheritance, anyone with a grievance against the established order. His numbers are growing." "How many?" Damon asked. "Perhaps 200 now, maybe more by week's end." The number settled over the hall like a burial shroud. 200 warriors united by discontent and led by someone ruthless enough to slaughter entire packs for strategic advantage. "What do you need from us?" Damon asked Marcus. Her brother looked surprised by the question. "Your Majesty?" "Your pack has been attacked because of their connection to my mate. That makes their welfare my responsibility. Do you need healers, supplies, temporary sanctuary?" Marcus straightened, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "We have wounded, sire, and the survivors are frightened. If we could shelter here until—" "Done." Damon's response was immediate. Lord Garrett, see that they're given quarters and whatever they need. Send our best healer to tend their wounded." "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. Then, to Thalira, "I'm sorry. For how Father treated you, for letting him send you to that auction. You deserved better from us." Thalira nodded, not trusting her voice. It was an apology she'd never expected to receive. "Leave us," Damon commanded, and the hall cleared with efficient speed. When they were alone, he turned her to face him. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Numb," she admitted. "Guilty. If I hadn't mated with you—" "Stop." His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This isn't your fault. Evil men make evil choices. You are not responsible for their actions. But people are dying because of me. People are dying because a rogue alpha wants to use you to get to me. There's a difference." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Thalira, I need you to understand something. This was always going to happen. If not now, then later. If not because of our mating, then for some other reason. Men like Scar don't need justification. They find excuses." She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the bond between them. "What do we do now?" "Now?" Damon's smile was all teeth and predatory intent. "Now we show them what happens when someone threatens what belongs to the Alpha King." Part 5. The Battle for Tomorrow. The War Council convened at dawn, the Great Hall transformed into a strategic command center. Maps covered every available surface, marked with colored pins representing friendly forces, enemy positions, and neutral territories. The air hummed with tension and the scent of determined wolves preparing for battle. Thalira sat at Damon's right hand, her presence a statement as much as a practical necessity. She was no longer just the rejected Omega he'd claimed. She was his mate, his queen-to-be, and these plans concerned her future as much as anyone's. "Latest reports put Scar's force at nearly 300, Lord Garrett announced, pointing to a cluster of red pins on the largest map. "They're moving through the Thornwood Valley, burning everything in their path. At their current pace, they'll reach our borders in 2 days." "Our forces?" Damon asked, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. 400 of our own, plus another 200 from allied packs who've answered the call. We have the numbers, but—" Lord Garrett hesitated. But they're not all seasoned warriors. Some are farmers who've barely held a sword. Scar's rogues are all fighters, outcasts and exiles who've survived by violence alone. Commander Kane, Damon's military advisor, leaned forward over the map. "We could meet them at Ironhold Pass, force them into a bottleneck where numbers matter less than strategy." "That would mean abandoning 3 villages to their approach," another advisor pointed out, "hundreds of innocent lives." "Better than losing everyone when they reach the castle," Kane replied grimly. Thalira had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now she found her voice. What if there was another way? The room fell silent. Several advisors exchanged glances, not hostile exactly, but uncertain. She was still new to this world of strategy and warfare. Damon's hand found hers beneath the table, a gesture of support. "What are you thinking? You said Scar is using me as bait to draw you out. What if we used that?" Thalira's heart hammered as every eye in the room fixed on her. "What if we gave him what he thinks he wants?" "Absolutely not." Damon's response was immediate and final. "I won't use you as bait." "But think about it," she pressed, gaining confidence as the idea took shape. "He expects you to hide me away, to protect me like some precious ornament. What if instead I appeared to be vulnerable? What if I was traveling with a small escort, seemingly trying to flee to safety?" "It's too dangerous," Lord Garrett said firmly. "If something went wrong, then we'd lose 1 Omega instead of hundreds of innocent people." Thalira's voice grew stronger. "I may be new to being a queen, but I understand duty. These people are my responsibility now, too." Damon was shaking his head before she finished speaking. "No, find another way." But Commander Kane was studying the map with new interest. "Actually, sire, It's not without merit. If we could lure Scar's force away from the villages, catch them in open ground where our cavalry advantage would matter. I said no. The alpha command in Damon's voice made everyone in the room take an involuntary step back. Everyone except Thalira. You're thinking with your heart instead of your head, she said quietly. That's not like you. Silver eyes blazed as he turned to face her fully. When it comes to you, I don't think with anything but my heart. You are mine to protect. And they are ours to protect. She gestured toward the map, toward the pins representing villages full of families and children. You taught me that being a queen means putting the needs of the many above your own wants. How is this different? The truth of her words hit home. Thalira could see it in his expression, in the way his jaw clenched as duty warred with instinct. There has to be another way, he said finally. Maybe there is. Marcus spoke up from his position near the wall. He'd been included in the council as a courtesy, but this was the first time he'd contributed. What if the escort wasn't as small as it appeared? All eyes turned to him. Explain, Damon commanded. Marcus approached the table, pointing to a winding river marked in blue. The Silver Run Road follows this river for 20 miles through fairly open country, perfect for an ambush, which is exactly what Scar would expect. But there are caves along the riverbank hidden by the willows. You could position 100 warriors there, invisible until needed. Commander Kane's eyes lit up. And if we sent outriders ahead, they could drive Scar's scouts away from the area, make it seem like we're trying to keep the road clear for our fleeing queen. The escort would need to look genuinely small, Lord Garrett added, warming to the idea despite his earlier objections. Maybe 20 warriors with Her Majesty's carriage clearly visible. 30, Damon said firmly, and they would all be my best. Thalira felt a flutter of hope mixed with terror. The plan could work. It was risky, but it could actually work. There's more, Marcus continued. Scar expects you to come charging to rescue her when she's attacked. What if you did exactly that, but not from the direction he anticipates? He traced a path on the map with his finger. If you took the northern route through Darkwater Forest, you could circle around behind them, catch them between your main force and the hidden warriors while they're focused on the carriage. The room erupted in discussion as the advisors began refining details, working out timing and logistics. Through it all, Damon remained silent, his eyes fixed on Thalira's face. You're really willing to do this? He asked quietly. I'm terrified, she admitted. But yes, these people accepted me when I had nothing to offer them but trouble. Now I have a chance to give something back. If anything happens to you, it won't. She reached up to cup his face, feeling the slight tremor in his hands as they covered hers. You'll be there. I trust you to keep me safe. Something shifted in his expression at those words. Trust had been hard-won between them, and they both knew it. All right, he said finally. We do this, but I want every detail planned perfectly. No room for error. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Thalira found herself fitted for lightweight armor disguised to look like a traveling dress, taught basic sword work by Commander Kane himself, and briefed on every aspect of the plan until she could recite it in her sleep. The hardest part was saying goodbye. I should be going with you, Elena fretted as she helped Thalira into the carriage at dawn. If you need anything... I need you to stay here and help coordinate the care of the refugees, Thalira said gently. That's how you help me most. The escort formed up around the carriage, 30 of Damon's finest warriors, all handpicked for their skill and loyalty. To any observer, they would look like a desperate attempt to protect a fleeing queen. In reality, each one was worth 3 ordinary soldiers. Damon appeared at the carriage window as they prepared to depart. He'd already left with the main force hours earlier, but he'd doubled back to see her off personally. Remember, he said, pressing something into her hand, if anything goes wrong, anything at all, you use this and run. Don't try to be a hero. She looked down at the small silver pendant he'd given her. It was warm to the touch and hummed with barely contained power. What is it? Emergency magic, my mother's work. It will get you out of any binding, break any lock, shatter any cage. Promise me you'll use it if you need to." "I promise." She leaned out to kiss him, quick and fierce. "I love you." The words had slipped out before she could stop them. It was the first time either of them had said it. Damon's eyes went wide, then blazed with something brighter than silver fire. "I love you too, little Omega. More than life itself." Then he was gone, melting back into the forest with the supernatural grace of his wolf. The carriage lurched into motion, carrying Thalira toward whatever destiny awaited them all. The Silver Run Road stretched ahead like a ribbon of possibility and terror, and somewhere in the distance, 300 rogue wolves waited to test everything they'd built together. The trap was sprung at midday, exactly as predicted. Thalira felt them coming before she saw them, a wrongness in the air that made her newly awakened Omega instincts scream warnings. The escort felt it too. She could see the tension in their postures, hands drifting toward weapons. "Steady," Commander Kane called softly from horseback beside the carriage. "Let them make the first move." They didn't have to wait long. The attack came from 3 sides simultaneously, rogues pouring out of the forest like a dark tide, howling their fury to the sky. They moved with the desperate savagery of wolves who had nothing left to lose, which made them more dangerous than any organized army. The escort formed a defensive circle around the carriage as planned, but Thalira could see they were deliberately giving ground, making their defense look more desperate than it was. To any observer, it would appear that the Alpha King's forces were overwhelmed and falling back toward the river. "Where is he?" a voice roared above the clash of steel. "Where is the king who hides behind his Omega's skirts?" Scar. Even without seeing him, Thalira knew that voice belonged to the rogue leader. There was madness in it, and rage, and something that might have been pain. "He's not here, you bastard," Kane shouted back, playing his part perfectly. "Gone to ground like the coward he is." A lie, but a necessary one. Every second they could keep Scar focused on the carriage instead of watching for flanking movements was a second that brought Damon's main force closer. The battle raged around them, controlled chaos that looked completely real. Several of the escort went down. Not dead, Thalira prayed, but certainly convincing in their falls. The circle grew smaller, tighter, more desperate-looking. Then she saw him. Scar was massive, easily as large as Damon, but with a wildness to him that spoke of too many years living rough. True to his name, a jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, giving his face a permanently snarling expression. When he shifted to his half-form, claws extending and fangs dropping, he looked like something from a nightmare. "There!" He pointed directly at the carriage with one clawed hand. "Bring me the Omega. Let's see if the great Alpha King will bargain for his precious mate." This was the moment, the critical point where everything could go right or disastrously wrong. More rogues pressed forward, and suddenly the carriage door was torn open. Rough hands reached for her, dragging her out into the chaos of battle. She didn't have to fake her terror. It was real and overwhelming and made her wolf whimper in submission. "Well, well," Scar's voice was a gravelly purr as she was hauled before him. "So this is the Omega that brought the mighty Alpha King to his knees. I have to say I'm underwhelmed." The insult stung, but Thalira kept her expression blank. Let him think her cowed and broken. Let him underestimate the woman Damon's love had helped her become. "Not much to say, little Omega? That's fine. You'll scream plenty when I start cutting pieces off you for your mate to find." That was when the hidden warriors struck. They erupted from their concealment among the willows like avenging spirits, 100 of Damon's finest hitting the rogue's flank with devastating precision. The battle transformed instantly from a rout to a rout, but now it was Scar's forces who were caught off guard and overwhelmed. And then Damon arrived. He came through the forest like a force of nature, shifted to his massive wolf form with his main force spreading out behind him like the wrath of the moon goddess herself. When he saw Thalira in Scar's grip, his howl shook the very air. The sound sent primal terror through every rogue on the field. This wasn't just any alpha. This was the Alpha King, and they had dared to touch his mate. Scar's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "Clever," he snarled, "but not clever enough. I still have your precious Omega." He pressed a knife to her throat, the silver blade burning against her skin. Around them, the battle had stilled as everyone focused on the confrontation between the two alphas. "Let her go," Damon said, his voice carrying despite the distance between them. He'd shifted back to human form, standing naked and magnificent and utterly unafraid. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, I intend to fight you," Scar laughed. "But first you're going to watch her die. You're going to feel what it's like to lose everything that matters." The knife pressed deeper, and Thalira felt warm blood trickle down her throat. This was it, the moment where everything hung in the balance. She thought of the pendant Damon had given her, warm against her chest. She could use it now, break free and run as he'd made her promise, save herself and let others clean up the mess. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She wasn't the rejected Omega who ran from conflict. She was the Alpha King's mate, and she had her own strength to draw on. Instead of reaching for the pendant, Thalira did something no one expected. She smiled. "You know," she said conversationally, "for someone who's supposed to be this big, terrifying rogue leader, you're really not very bright." Scar's grip faltered in surprise. "What? I mean, did you really think Damon would let me come here without a backup plan? Did you really think he'd trust my safety to 30 warriors and a clever ambush?" Understanding began to dawn in Scar's eyes, but it was too late. Thalira pressed her hand to her chest, not to the pendant, but to the spot where her mate mark was hidden beneath the armor. The bond between her and Damon blazed to life, letting her draw on his strength, his speed, his supernatural reflexes. She twisted in Scar's grip with inhuman agility, the silver knife scoring a line across her collarbone instead of her throat. Before he could recover, she drove her knee up into his solar plexus with force borrowed from the most powerful alpha in the territories. Scar doubled over with a grunt of pain and surprise, and Thalira rolled away from him just as Damon hit him like a freight train. The two alphas went down in a tangle of claws and fangs, rolling across the ground in a battle that was as much about dominance as survival. Around them, the fight resumed as rogues and loyalists crashed together in the final desperate moments of the conflict. But Thalira only had eyes for Damon. He was magnificent in his fury, every movement calculated and deadly. This was what it meant to be the Alpha King, not just strength or political power, but the perfect fusion of human intelligence and wolf instinct. Scar was strong, but he was also half mad with rage and isolation. Damon fought with the calm precision of someone who had everything to live for. The end came quickly. Scar managed to land one solid blow, claws raking across Damon's ribs, but it left him overextended. Damon seized the opening, getting behind the rogue alpha and snapping his neck with one swift motion. Scar's body hit the ground and didn't move again. The silence that followed was profound. The remaining rogues, seeing their leader dead, threw down their weapons in surrender or fled into the forest. The battle was over. Thalira found herself swept up in Damon's arms before she could blink, pressed against his chest as he buried his face in her hair. "Never again," he said fiercely. "Never again are you bait for anything." "It worked," she pointed out, though her own voice was shaking with reaction. "I don't care. My heart can't take it." He pulled back to look at her, hands gentle as they traced the shallow cut on her collarbone. "Are you hurt? Besides this?" "I'm fine. Damon, I'm fine." She cupped his face, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "We did it. We saved them all." Around them, the aftermath of battle was already being organized. Wounded tended, prisoners secured, the dead honored. But in that moment, there was only the two of them and the bond that had made it all possible. "I'm proud of you," Damon said quietly. "You were magnificent." "I had a good teacher," she replied, then kissed him with all the love and relief and desperate joy she felt. They had won. They had saved their people, and they had proven that sometimes the Omega nobody wanted could become exactly what everyone needed. Epilogue. 6 months later. The coronation took place on the first day of spring, when the mountain air was sweet with the promise of new beginnings. Thalera stood before the altar in the castle's great cathedral, wearing a gown of midnight blue silk embroidered with silver wolves. The crown, Daemon's mother's crown, passed down through generations of queens, waited on a velvet cushion beside the ancient ceremonial sword. The cathedral was packed. Representatives from every pack in the territories had come to witness the moment when a rejected Omega became their queen. Some had traveled hundreds of miles, drawn by curiosity or duty, or the simple desire to see if the stories were true. They were all true, and more besides. Do you, Thalera of Nightfall Pack, swear to protect and serve the people of these territories as their queen, to uphold justice and defend the innocent, to rule with wisdom and compassion all the days of your life? The words of the ancient oath rang through the cathedral like music. Thalera's voice was clear and strong as she gave her response, the same words spoken by queens for over 1,000 years. I do so swear, by moon and star, and the sacred bond that binds us all. Daemon stepped forward to place the crown on her head, his touch gentle despite the weight of ceremony. When their eyes met, she saw everything they'd built together reflected back at her, love and trust and unshakable partnership. Rise, Queen Thalera of the Northern Territories, he said formally. Then, quietly enough that only she could hear, rise, my heart. The cathedral erupted in cheers as she stood, the crown catching the light from hundreds of candles. Outside she could hear the people celebrating, the sound of joy echoing off the mountain walls. Later, much later, when the feast was over and the guests had retired and the castle had settled into quiet contentment, Thalera found herself back in the gardens where she and Daemon had shared so many conversations. She was still wearing her coronation gown, though she'd removed the heavy formal crown in favor of the simple silver circlet he'd given her weeks ago. Any regrets? Daemon asked, joining her on the stone bench beneath the apple tree. Thalera considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been nobody, a rejected Omega heading for an auction block and a life of servitude. Now she was queen of the most powerful territory in the known world, mated to a man who loved her beyond reason, surrounded by people who looked to her for guidance and protection. Only one, she said finally. Daemon's eyebrows rose in surprise. What's that? I regret that it took so long for us to find each other. She leaned against his side, drawing comfort from his warmth and strength. Think of all the time we wasted. Not wasted, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. We needed that time to become the people we were meant to be. You needed to learn your own strength, and I needed to learn that strength and gentleness could exist in the same heart. Above them, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not in sorrow or anger, but in pure joy at being alive and free and part of something larger than itself. I love you, Thalera said, the words as easy as breathing now. And I love you, my queen, my heart, my everything. They sat in comfortable silence as night settled over the mountains, two souls who had found their perfect match against all odds. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility and promise. The rejected Omega had finally come home,